Okay, so what we're going to talk about today is ServiceNow, the AI control tower for business reinvention, and AWS, the world's leading cloud computing platform, together powering AI-driven workflows on the cloud built to scale. So let's talk about why AWS and ServiceNow. So there are three things: savings, innovation, and impact. And first, savings. So you can run ServiceNow directly on AWS Cloud. How many people knew that? This was launched last year. One? Okay. Three, great. And so what's great about this is, one, you can meet your data residency, your performance requirements, and burn down your customer requirements, and be connected to your cloud strategy. This is amazing for so many customers. They love being able to procure through Marketplace. They love being able to decrement the PPA. If you have a cloud strategy, your governance, compliance, audit is so much easier on one cloud versus spread across a zillion different clouds. And then innovation. So what we'll talk about today is we have over 100 integrations with ServiceNow products and AWS products. They are out-of-the-box integrations. So anytime you're using AWS Sitewise, AWS Connect, Redshift, like you name it, we have an integration with a ServiceNow product, and many of our customers are super jazzed about that. DXC is one that is using that today. Then let's talk about impact. So this is all about accelerating time to value. And we've proven deployments with Bell Canada, with Pearson, with DXC, with Boomi, that customers are already using these integrations, are excited about how they are impacting their end customers, and we'll talk about that more with the DXC interview. So the next chapter of enterprise transformation is here. AI, data, and workflows all unified on one platform that replaces chaos with clarity. This is the ServiceNow AI platform where intelligence is not added, but it is built in. The big picture is that AI is everywhere, and it's very fragmented. Companies are racing to launch AI agents, and they end up with disconnected tools and scattered data. So ServiceNow brings that all together on the platform you already know, love, and trust, and we coordinate a dynamic network of AI agents that turn intent into action. It's powered by our AI orchestrator, it's governed by AI control tower, and it's your single command center for security, compliance, and performance. So to make AI truly transformational, it needs connected data. And that's where Workflow Data Fabric comes into play. ServiceNow unifies all of your structured, your unstructured, and real-time data through Workflow Data Fabric, which is connected to AWS. The 100+ integrations that ServiceNow has on its own outside of AWS are integration hub spokes. So think about Workday, think about DocuSign, think about Zoom. They are all integrated into ServiceNow. Zero-copy connectors, so AWS Redshift, Snowflake, Databricks, those are live zero-copy connectors that don't need replication, that don't need complexity. They are all just immediately plugged in. And then external content creators, so SharePoint, Slack, Confluence. Now AI can move across every function in every layer of your tech stack on one platform, one architecture, and one data model. So if you think about it, we have every industry covered. We have all AI, all data, all workflows, any cloud, and any system. So we don't just build AI, we put it to work for you. So in financial services, trust is the ultimate currency. And in the digital age, we are all built on speed. So let's say a customer is filing an insurance claim and or reports fraud. We, you, I, don't care about the back-end silos. We just want to have results, and we want to have the problem fixed to resolution as quickly as possible. So raise your hand if you have ever felt that an insurance claim is more miserable than the actual accident and have paid out of pocket for an accident. Okay, like a bunch of us, because it is so miserable. And that is something that DXC is focused on fixing. So this slide represents the nervous system of the modern financial institution, and we're connecting AWS's intelligence with ServiceNow's action layer. So if we take claims automation, which is a huge area with a ton of ROI, in the past, a customer, one of us, who has had an accident, would upload a PDF, for example, and then a human would have to open it, they'd have to read it, they'd have to key in all the details, and it is a very slow, very error-prone process, and it's extremely frustrating. We actually have a customer who is an insurance company that pays double or triple claims on many of their insurance claims. So, they would, let's just say, pay the person that's submitting the claim. They would pay the mechanic, and then they would pay the insurance. Like 3 different claims, and it's all backed up. So they have, I think, I forget exactly what the number is, but millions and millions of dollars that are just paid out the door that they haven't been able to track. These are the sort of things that we're able to fix with ServiceNow. So let's just use this example, right? AWS Textract, instead of having a human read these PDFs that are uploaded by an insurance claim, Textract is able to look at all of the text, ingest it through the AWS machine, the policy numbers, the amounts, the dates, with near perfect accuracy, and then the data is plugged into a workflow, so no human has to engage with it. That data is immediately piped into ServiceNow. We have what's called financial services operations, and it triggers a workflow which validates the policy limits. If it meets the criteria, it automates the approval, and the process is out of human hands and perfectly automated. So this is about how are we delivering outcomes and no longer just processing transactions. So then we go into healthcare. And this is what it looks like in an actual hospital, in a lab, in the back office. On the front end, we have virtual patient assistants. So we'll use Amazon Lex to understand patient intent. ServiceNow immediately actions that intent, books appointments for people, pulls lab results, and no human has to be in the loop. On the admin side, staff onboarding is an extremely administrative, painful process for anybody who is in healthcare. And we slash the time that it takes to get a clinician credentialed and compliant by automating that data pull from AWS databases directly into ServiceNow workflows. Device maintenance is actually one of the coolest joint integrations that we have launched. And this is where operational technology plus IT has been saving lives. So let's say an MRI machine is in a very busy city hospital, and it's highly used. So every 10 minutes or every hour, it is like completely booked out. What happens with Amazon IoT site-wise is that they have these little orange devices. You snap that onto an MRI machine or any other machine, and it can tell whether it's vibrating too much, if it's hot, if it's cold, and it will flag in the system that the machine's gonna go down in real time. And so when this anomaly is detected, it's not just logged into a dashboard that nobody looks at, it's then flagged to, let's just say a database. With ServiceNow, it doesn't just go to an email like, oh, Courtney, by the way, your MRI machine is going to go down. Well, great. Like I don't have the machinery, I don't have the equipment, I don't have the tools. I have no idea how to fix an MRI machine. I don't know about you. With ServiceNow, we connect it to the right technician with the right tools at the right time to fix the machine so that it is constantly running. It is fixed before it actually goes down, and there is no downtime. This also happened on the shop floor of a big car manufacturer. So they like to have a car come in pieces and parts and come out the door in 1 minute and 38 seconds. We were able to bring that down to 1 minute and 36 seconds, which is actually a really significant time savings because the machines and equipment were able to go through that same process and get fixed before they actually, they shut down the full operations of the manufacturer. So these are really cool integrations out of the box being used by our customers worldwide. I'm going to bring up Daniel Stanovich from DXC. He is the regional GM of American Insurance, and we're going to talk about ServiceNow on AWS at DXC. Yes. Thanks for being here, Dan.
Thanks for having me.
Such a pleasure to have you. So why don't you just give us a quick intro of your background at DXC, and then we'll get into the partnership between ServiceNow
So just a
and AWS.
bit about DXC Insurance, because DXC is a big company, but I'm representing the insurance piece of that. So DXC Insurance is the largest insurance software and BPS provider in the world by pretty much any measure. I run a piece of that business, which is our life BPS, so really focus on the life and annuity insurance, and it's really back office operations for about 30 large life insurance companies in North America.
Awesome. And you oversee over 30 life insurance companies, which is extremely impressive, both technology and operations. Mm-hmm. How are ServiceNow and AWS together helping you run and scale that operation today?
Yeah, so again, from DXC Insurance standpoint, we're one of the largest insurance users of AWS. So we run, it's our cloud hosting platform. We run what we call our Assure platform on that, which is kind of the connective tissue that allows us to connect into a lot of these heritage policy administration systems that we interact with. Some of those we actually bring up and host on the cloud, which is in AWS, and then some of them we just use the platform to access with data. And then what ServiceNow actually does, so you think about it in layers, right? You've got the Assure platform, and then what ServiceNow gives us is the ability to orchestrate work across those using agentic AI, and then also has a workflow layer on top of that. So just from a technology view, that's how we view it. But I think as you look at a bigger picture, we were already such a large user of AWS. When we went out, particularly my business, I went out to look for something to help me simplify and automate a lot of the business that we do with the business process outsourcing, right? It's a very people-oriented business today, a lot of manual process, very similar to some of our customer shops out in the market. And we looked at a couple of different providers of that technology, workflow technology. And when you think of workflow technology, ServiceNow is really the first that comes to your mind. And when you look at the investments and things that they're making in the AI space, particularly agentic AI, it was kind of the perfect marriage for us.
What I love about some of the ServiceNow product offerings, specific to industries, is we don't build anything unless there's true customer demand. Mm-hmm. So we find companies that are just saying, we're building this ourselves because you don't offer it. And then we realize, okay, we're going to go offer it because there's true demand. When you think about transformation in insurance, what measurable impact are you seeing in terms of cost to serve and productivity and claim cycle?
Yeah, and I think just to build on your point, right? I mean, so ServiceNow brings us that technical capability, and what we have is that deep insurance knowledge. Yep. So we kind of paired those two things together. And when we looked at the businesses I support, we actually identified there's 127 workflows that support a life and annuity customer. Wow. And we went through and re-engineered those and automated those, with the partnership that we have with ServiceNow. And we're building product now on ServiceNow to support that. And what we're actually looking at is 30 to 40% improvement in processing times and same percentages in cost reduction. So for us, it's massive in terms of our ability to operate more efficiently, but then also really increasing our productivity and really driving a better customer experience for our customer, right? It's faster time to value essentially for our customers, which is great. You talked a lot about a claims process. Some of these claims processes can be 60 days long to get your life insurance claim, which obviously when you're in that situation, 60 days is a long time. And so if we can find ways to shorten that using automation and some of the capabilities that ServiceNow brings, and in combination with AWS, then we can bring that down maybe to 10, 15 days, which would be a massive improvement for these companies and for the individuals affected. That's
awesome. So you are building smart apps with ServiceNow. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, smart apps, again, the way I would yes, we are building smart apps, but smart apps are kind of broken down pieces of workflows, right? So if you think about a workflow as a big end-to-end process, but what and to implement some of that can take some time, right? We're finding that out as we're implementing, our Assure BPM into my shop today, which is kind of the full end-to-end workflow, all 127 workflows I talked about. But what smart apps are is actually discrete pieces of value that we can deliver quicker, right? So if you're an insurance company, what if I can just go and automate your submission process, right? Your application submission process. So I'm not doing the entire end-to-end, what we would call new business process. I'm just automating that piece, which will drive a lot of efficiency, right? So if you're getting 1,000 applications a month, and those are manually provided, so, they're actually written on applications. If we can automate the reading of those applications and the processing of those applications to bring speed to value to you quicker, that's really what a smart app is. So it allows us to kind of incrementally deliver value in a lot faster. So in weeks versus maybe months, right? Which is for us a real value.
And how are you prioritizing those smart apps? There's 127 workflows.
Yeah.
How many smart apps are there, and how do you prioritize?
You know what it is? It's actually customer feedback that's driving a lot of that. So we obviously interact with our customers quite a bit, and we just actually had a customer week, which is a user conference down in October in Charleston, and we got a lot of good feedback there. And you pretty much drill into a couple key topics pretty quick, right? It's going to be claims, it's going to be some of the submission process I talked about that are going to drive some of those pain points, and so that's really what's driving it, is the customer demand at this point.
So DXC is customer zero, both ServiceNow on AWS and of the smart apps.
Yeah.
How are you implementing them internally in your business? And as you start to offer them to external customers, what are you learning?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So again, we started our partnership with ServiceNow about a year ago. And, again, we've obviously been developing a lot of our kind of what we wanted to do. But we initially started that we were going to replace my existing workflow system and capabilities with the ServiceNow capabilities in one fell swoop. Like you run into in the marketplace, there's a lot of technical challenge to that, and it takes longer than we would have liked, especially for customer zero. And so we're still doing that. But in the meantime, what we've actually pivoted to now is doing more of a smart app strategy, where we can say we can drip in some of this capability a little bit faster with smart apps. And so now I'm actually able to deliver value quicker. And again, I'm replicating what we're going to do for our customers, right? So I can say, hey, we've done this in my shop, and we've automated the claims submission process, right? We've seen these results and and we can do it for you in weeks as well, and just spin that product up while we're working on getting that whole end-to-end process in place. So I think it's a massive thing, and just in terms of being able to deliver value to customers quicker in areas that are really causing them pain.
Awesome. So last question. If we look ahead to the future, how do you see the combination of AWS, ServiceNow, DXC Insurance transforming the future of insurance operations?
Yeah, I mean, we look at it as the perfect combination. I mean, these are the largest players really in their respective spaces, right? AWS from a cloud hosting standpoint, ServiceNow from a workflow technology, agentic AI standpoint, and then DXC being the leader in insurance software and business process outsourcing. For us, it was just like it's the perfect combination of organizations to solve this problem in the insurance industry, which again is our transformational focus for us, right? I mean, insurance companies, especially life insurance companies, have been doing the same thing for decades, right? They've made their problems worse over decades, right? They've bought all these different technologies. They've kind of took process and added more process on top of that. And where you end up is a lot of what we like to call capability debt, right? Which is, you take all your technical debt and your processing debt and add that together, and that gives you this capability debt. So it really hinders the organization's ability to grow and progress. And so if we can eliminate a lot of that by putting in some of this automation and agentic AI, I think that's going to make a world of difference.
Awesome. Thanks so much for being here. Thanks for being a partner. And for those of you who want to do a breakout session, like roundtable with Dan, that will be an opportunity later on this week.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, so now we're bringing up Ann Culver, I believe. If I can change the slides. Ann Culver from AWS.
Hi, everyone. So as Courtney mentioned, ServiceNow on AWS has been available since January of last year. And we have a fully integrated stack, so basically a mirrored stack from what ServiceNow does on their own data centers. But the advantage with AWS is it integrates with all the other AWS services that we have to offer. So I'm not going to read through these slides, but let's see if I can get this so that you can see it. So we have spent a lot of time trying to make sure that we've got the right integration. So as you look at your orchestrated workflows across the enterprise, those interface with the services that you know and love and use from AWS. And I'm not gonna go into any of these in great detail. So just so that you can see, obviously, one of the things we've been focusing on together is AI, making sure that ServiceNow is able to provide AWS models through Amazon Bedrock as part of Now Assist, so that integration has been complete. But it allows you to choose your own model and use it across the ServiceNow platform running on top of AWS, obviously, so you can see that there. One of the integrations that we recently announced is AI Control Tower with Amazon Bedrock Agent Core. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Agent Core. Yes, hopefully. It is going to be something you hear a lot about this week. But it is Amazon's basically entry point into the AI world and agentic AI. So it's meant to be sort of your one-stop entry point. And that integration, again, with ServiceNow, enables your agentic workflow across the enterprise. So getting rid of all that siloed data, making sure everything is working seamlessly across the platform. I think S3 was mentioned in another meeting I was in earlier today, but S3 is becoming and has been obviously a big source of data where we have a lot of partners, including ServiceNow, that are looking to enable customer S3 data across what they're doing from a SaaS platform perspective. Workflow Data Fabric with S3 tables integration allows you to do that. So again, I'm not going to read this because I am not an engineer, but there it is. The level of integrations is growing. So we've been working with ServiceNow for a number of years on the integration front, way before ServiceNow and AWS was available. So you can see across the entire AWS stack where we've got integrations here. Very, very extensive. And if you're interested in learning more about any of these, please come by the ServiceNow booth. We've got folks who can dive deep on each one of these with you. Another level of integration with IoT. I'll give you all a moment because I'm not going to walk through this one. But you can follow the bouncing ball. At ServiceNow Knowledge, we talked about or announced zero-copy connectors with Workflow Data Fabric. So you can see here how it's meant to connect data silos, obviously decrease spend, increase performance, help with security, simplified compliance, and obviously control your secure access. And again, we've got folks at the booth who can walk through this with you. And that's it. Okay, we're going to move on to a panel discussion. And I'd love to invite Courtney and John back to the stage. Courtney, are you joining or am I doing this? I'm doing this. Okay, John, come on up. John Licata, everyone, from ServiceNow.
Hello.
Hello. John and I do a lot of fun discussions out there in the world these days. So we're going to talk a little bit about how AI and agentic is converging and what that means for folks using the ServiceNow platform, as well as some of the advancements that we're seeing out there in the world. So let's start with maybe a technical foundation. We're hearing a lot about orchestration and collaboration among AI agents. How do you see AWS and ServiceNow approaching multi-agent orchestration?
Yeah, so I'm glad you said multi-agent because we live in a world right now where people talk about an agent as a singular. But we need to start thinking about expanding that in teams of agents working together. So with Bedrock, and you have access to a lot of different AI models, which is wonderful. But I think we actually have to figure out how can we have like that single pane of glass? How can we access to understand? How could you look at maybe the AI control tower of ServiceNow to help govern, put provisions in place, put parameters? You don't want to have agentic anarchy you need rules. And I think sometimes that's lost in today's talk about agentic AI, is that we need to put parameters and guardrails up. Pretty soon we're going to start to see audits happen when it comes to AI. It's inevitable. So I think one of the good things about how we're thinking about it together is how can we look at how you are leveraging AI models with AWS, and how can you bring the enterprise lens in from ServiceNow? So the whole better together angle, I think, is definitely, it's something that you've heard probably time and time again the last several days, but it's true. Because I think we bring the enterprise lens to the agentic opportunity in front, but I think that you have the cloud expertise that together, I think that kind of expands your horizon of what you can do with agents. But I also think another thing that's important to note is as we're thinking about the expansion of AI agents, there still has to be humans in the loop. We keep forgetting us. We keep forgetting people. So we need to figure out when there's more serious decision-making that needs to take place. Maybe the agents do certain tasks, but there still should be a human in the loop for the more complicated. And so I think the orchestration has to be across different landscape. And by landscape, I mean AWS Cloud. We both deal with on-prem and SaaS companies. And there's a lot of different players. And each one has their own governance model. So how can we help each other by bringing this amazing end-to-end visibility and transparency that's super needed today. And I think that's the benefit of the AI Control Tower and how we're already starting to see unlocking real value. And I think that's something too, is let's get value and not just talk about agents doing X, Y, Z. People need to see results. But as you're building these solutions, it should be something that governance is in part of your thinking of how you're going to advance your models and your workflows. We need governance, and I think that's something that is an industry sort of push to do together, but something I'm excited that we're doing together.
We've talked before about the intersection of innovation and governance. Maybe provide some thoughts around that.
I mean, so much is happening in the world today. I mean, you have NIST regulations, you have DORA in Europe with operational resiliency, so many different things that we need to take into account. And I think that expands the difficulty, I think, of what to do with agents. If you give agents certain leeway to do a task, when do you take back the provision to do the task, the security? Do you do it when the task is done, when the job is complete? Like, there's so many different agents along the way. It's not one agent doing the whole job. You can have teams of agents doing pieces of the job. And so I think that's the interesting thing, is how do you maintain your channel checks? And again, human in the loop is important, but I can't emphasize enough this idea of AI audits and how we need to start thinking not just of how workflows exist today, we need to reimagine workflows. And I think that's one of the more amazing things when we speak and our teams come together, is we start to think about, let's turn the current workflows on their head. Where can we start to reimagine the art of the possible? I mean, art of the possible is something that got us all into this, but what does that actually mean? And I think orchestrating that and making sure that we can lead by example by delivering governance when it's needed, but also bring value to the table. I think we can't underscore enough that it's not just about saying the agents are doing X, Y, and Z. People want to see value.
Mm-hmm. Today's AI agents are often limited by scalability and coordination issues due to lots of different reasons. Fragmented data pipelines is one of those problems that ServiceNow is solving. Maybe you can illustrate that a little bit.
I'll give an example. Courtney earlier, she talked about finance, and she gave some information related to the fragmentation around finance. I spent 20 years of my career on Wall Street. There is such a need for regulation oversight, and that's happening whether you have currencies, digital stable coins. A lot that's happening in the world today. So with finance especially, there's a lot of fraud. And I think identity management and fraud also need to take place. But also now think about it in the world that we're discussing right now with agents. There could be agent fraud. We can't just take for face value that the agent's going to do the task, and that's how we need to take it as trust. So trust is something that's inherent, but in the financial industry, it's something that's a huge concern. You have a lot of agents doing transactions. Who's governing the authority to distribute capital? That's why I think it's important to have the human in the loop. But Wall Street is one of the biggest areas, and pharma is another one, thinking about, personalized medicine and what you can do to deliver that, and people's rights and personal data and, HIPAA violations. So I think what you're seeing right now is a look into what could we do, but what can we do ethically and bring responsible AI into the agentic equation.
From that perspective, and you look at the engineering task in front of us, right? There was something that I read the other day about the memory scale that we've got to now start looking at as well with AI. Has ServiceNow looked into that a little bit?
So I think it's always important to, first of all, I have 2 young kids, so memory is becoming something I don't have much of these days. But I think, when we're trying to think of, imagine a world where each of us has hundreds of agents. So I think it's great to use Gen AI for certain summarization capabilities and do certain tasks, but we have to be our own creative engine. And I think that's something I'm personally excited about as we work together, is I think we bring the best out of each other, AWS and ServiceNow. But I think, first of all, intelligence is only as good as you can use it. So it's great to have the visibility into data, but if you don't know how to interpret the data, you're at a disadvantage. If you don't know how to put the data, use it at the right time in the right place, you're at a disadvantage. I was talking to someone the other day, talking about intelligence when it comes to finance. If you had models give everybody the same sort of information, would the stock market just be flat? And I took a moment to think about this, looking back into my earlier parts of my career, and think about it. There's a lot of investment banks that have had program trading around for over 2 decades. Some hedge funds lose money, some hedge funds make money. It's how you interpret the data. So I think when it comes to the future of agents, we have to start to bring in contextuality into this too, because we all consume information differently. So just to say, here's the blanket data, we're all going to have the same results, I think is not the right frame of mind. We need to think about the contextual nature of agents, and that's going to take time. But this is part of the research that has to be brought forward, is how do we train agents to think like us? And it's not so easy to say that. I think we need to figure out what we really want the agents to do, and they might know certain pieces of information. And I think this is where we're going to see an evolution. We don't need to give that agent everything about us. They need to, or in every part of the business ecosystem, they need to do one thing and one thing right, repetitively and at scale. And I think that's where you're going to start to see, specialists, the way we have in our own human jobs. We have specialists who do different things. Agents are going to become specialists. And I think so intelligence, only as good as you can use it. And I look forward to seeing how we evolve that together.
So smarter resource allocation.
Sure.
Right? Many enterprises are still guessing how many agents or humans to allocate towards a project. From your standpoint, sorry, that was my ringer too, so I'm like, wait, what? How are AWS and ServiceNow working together to bring data-driven benchmarking to agents and human resource planning? What does that mean for productivity and budget?
I think it's a marvel when you start to think about how many agents do you actually need to do a job? I think it's a complicated question. When we refer to agents, it's taken for granted. Is it 7 agents? Is it 20 agents? Is it 3 humans? Is it 5 humans? So I think right now it's been a guessing game, and that's hurt people who have allocated money towards AI seeking faster returns, because they actually are not allocating the proper amount. And what the beauty of our relationship is to explore what could that look like. And so it's exciting to know that we're both committed to exploring that together, because I think if we have the benchmarking put in place, it can allow you as developers and engineers the ability to make better decisions with prototyping too, and see what works and what doesn't. And right now that's a guessing game, and we all know that we have to show tangible results. So I think benchmarking is something that I look forward to in the new year, which is not that far away. The both of us coming forward together with academic partnerships, because I think that we need to ground everything that we're discussing in research. And one of the beauties of our relationship is we don't go for the hype headline. And I do think that the industry has been hurt by a lot of headlines. And for us, I think we, as ServiceNow and AWS have come together, we're trying to figure out how can we actually support what we're saying, So I like the methodical approach of taking research and turning research into validity and validity into action that we both could benefit from. So that's been a wonderful thing. So they say what stays what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. I'm happy that that goes beyond the world because we're doing some bright things together.
Well, it's a great segue. We are working together towards a academic partnership, ServiceNow, AWS, and a well-known institution, to experiment more with technology so that we've got some benchmarking, maybe walk the audience through why we're doing this together and what the outcome we're expecting to get.
Yeah, I mean, this is the fun part of the conversation for me.
Yeah, this is. Yeah.
So I think it's interesting because AI is fantastic, but also has limitations. And so as we are thinking about how do we help you become more future ready as you're delivering solutions to your customers and in your businesses, we are looking actively at the role of quantum computing plus AI. So quantum plus AI and the role of agents. There's a lot of opportunities that we foresee that the agentic ecosystem is only beginning. There's a lot to happen, and again, teams of agents operating in different landscapes, again, across SaaS companies, on-prem businesses, as well as in the cloud, and we need to figure out how we can manage this better, how we can attack more difficult problems. So quantum will absolutely not be used for everything, but we do believe there is a future where certain business cases make sense to explore, and the endeavor that we have with AWS is to look at the use cases, see what makes the most sense, again, grounded in research and validity, but bring it forward in a way that we are confident that it can help people. And I think that goes back to our mutual roots of helping people and putting AI to work for people. So quantum plus AI, it's exciting. Look at the role of simulation, what we might be able to do in natural disaster relief or in the financial space, but beyond. Look at personalized medicine, things that we might be able to look at individuals versus the mass. And so we feel even with supply chain and logistics, I mean, who would have thought a few years ago there would have been a vessel stuck in the Suez Canal and it crippled global trade for many days? We need to start anticipating more and having that modeling, more advanced digital twins. So we do feel like there's a component that needs to be looked at for better decision making, and we hope that that enterprise lens with a quantum plus AI story is beneficial to those using AWS as well as ServiceNow.
So on that quantum computing track, how do you see quantum computing shaping industry moving forward, or industries?
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, first of all, I mean, look at, even if you're based here in the United States, there's mandates out of the White House, there's new regulations out of NIST. The financial companies will have to be reporting more on quantum readiness. Companies that we've been speaking to have already said that the way people report on Wall Street for sustainability initiatives may soon have to report quantum readiness. And we're excited that we published not too long ago, several months ago, the first quantum readiness story from ServiceNow. And we're excited because it's grounded in something that is near term. The ServiceNow Vault team in Q1 of next year, post-quantum cryptography. PQC is classical based, but nevertheless, it's a journey. We have to start there. So I think how it shapes is forcing people to think about industries different, but also, again, elevating the governance piece. What can we do to help people, help companies safeguard data? Because right now there is the harvest now, decrypt later phenomenon that impacts all businesses. So what can we do to start thinking about that more rapidly? And so I think moving from PQC and advancing it into ways that could become global standards, I think that's where us getting involved together in the public sector and as well in industry, I just think it's an amazing opportunity to think about what the global world could look like in this new paradigm that I think is, again, looking at agentic AI is still very new, and we need governance. I can't say that enough to all of you as you're building your solutions. We need to figure out how to bring truth in, because right now there's a lot of hallucinations that need to be revisited too. So, the role of quantum would be something that we think as an accelerator to AI. I had said earlier quantum plus AI because it is an accelerator. AI is great, but it could do better, and we think quantum could be a really good remedy for that.
So how do we get our workforce ready for that combination, for AI plus quantum?
Well, first, I think enablement is key. I mean, I think, in many businesses, I think it's important to put together AI AI enablement. But I think as we have in ServiceNow, we actually are dedicating time for quantum enablement in 2026. I think it's important to do both. Not everyone's is a quantum physicist or they're trained in classical AI, and it's hard to bring those people out. But there's such an appetite we're finding internally for engineers that we have in AI to venture into the quantum side. And so there are courses, certifications, things that we've even discussed, maybe even doing some certifications together. But this is a journey. This is not something that you're gonna do this by January 15th and you're gonna have the answer. It is a journey, but we feel very confident that it's the right path to go on.
If you could give one piece of advice to the builders in the audience, how can they start engaging with ServiceNow and AWS on co-innovation?
Yeah, well, good question. So I'm part of the future team for ServiceNow, and I think it's important to, it has to be bi-directional. It can't be us coming always to you and saying, hey, we have a solution. We want to know what the problem is. We'd rather hear from you to say this has been a pain point. Hearing from customers, so jointly hearing from customers to say how we might be able to help you is definitely paramount. I think that we need to understand is what can we do from a pilot perspective. You have to ask leadership, is it okay to have a window of time? Because I think we need time, whether we dedicate 3 months to attacking a specific problem or a year in a research study. I think that's important. Again, we need to ground it in validity. So I think where we can start to see this is pick up a phone, an email to you and me, and see where are you finding that there's an opportunity to leverage innovation. And I think we have innovation forums. We invite people to EBCs where we focus on innovation workshops and kind of get to the crux of the problem. Sometimes people come in with one problem and they realize in the grand scheme of things, it was very short term. So if we're talking about being in a world of horizons, we need to start thinking about, short, medium, and long term. But Horizon 3 is not 5 years away anymore. The speed of innovation has happened so fast that we need to figure out a way to accelerate innovation. So that patience is getting shorter, and I think we have to deliver the results. So jointly, one thing that you said earlier, just to say about, how back to the enablement. You need to get support from leadership. You need to have a cross-org committee focused on innovation, focused on quantum plus AI, focused on AI. I think people realize a lot of people work on projects in silos. And I think that one of the beauties of how we can work together is help break the silos. So we do that first internally, cross-org, and then cross-company, like we've been doing. I think it's been successful as we started exploring possibilities with the role of quantum plus AI. We pushed each other behind closed doors, and I think that's my ask of you. You need the cross-team alignment, because we often find that that's such a hindrance for innovation. And also, the next earnings report shouldn't be the reason why you move innovation forward. We need to think more agility, but also longevity.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. We have a few minutes for some questions from the audience. If anybody has a question for John? Anyone?
I can't even see. It's
Yeah, it is very bright. All right, well, I'll ask you one. So one of the things that we've talked about in this whole quantum world is kind of like where to start, right? So I think a lot of organizations had that same thing with AI. Where do you start? And we have joint customers that are still trying to figure that out. So as organizations are looking at where to start with AI and starting their journey, how do they start looking at quantum and starting that journey?
I think you have to see where you're already facing pain points in your business and seeing where you're already having difficulty with AI. Some of the more complex computations will require an opportunity to look at quantum, but I think that having the ability to recognize what's already working and what's not is really important as step one. I think it's important to think about putting quantum to work. I think there was a slide earlier that Courtney had up of AI plus data plus workflows. And you have to understand, is there an opportunity for AI plus data plus quantum AI workflows? So a lot of it is to test and try it, but I think you have to start by understanding what is your current environment and where are you seeing gaps? And like I said earlier, quantum will not solve everything, but we are leading with AI and trying to fill gaps with quantum, and that's where I think you need to look into your own organization and fill the gaps.
Agreed. So at AWS, we're seeing organizations, a lot of healthcare organizations using quantum, just because of the computational, nature. How do you see? I know you talked about the workforce a little bit earlier today, but what types of people now do we need to employ to start thinking about the problems we don't even know we have yet?
Look, I have a 8-year-old son who's coding right now. I used to go outside and go play soccer. He's building Minecraft and all these things. The next generation is coming up very different than us. Kids today are already using AI in school. I think data science is really important. I think playing around with different models is also very important. ChatGPT is not an AI strategy. And so I think what we need to use all the different availability of models that are out there, and I think exposing kids to this, I think, is really important. But as the kids become the next leaders, we ourselves need to figure out, what do we want to do with this? So I think, there's a lot of academic institutions that offer free certifications around quantum computing. I think that's also very important. You and I have had the opportunity to speak at a couple of academic institutions, and there is a willingness to open up different paths with like leveraging students in college and bring them into your company. So I think that's a new avenue. Internships, of course. But I think that there's just an opportunity right now to look into math, because there will be limitations. You're talking about zeros and ones, and you're talking about nature. So it's quite different. So I just think that I feel like people say you need to study this and just this. And I feel like you should study everything, because you learn one model and next week a new one comes out. It's so hard. It's like, Charlie Brown when he kicks the football and loosely moves the goalpost. That's how AI is today. Like we're getting too comfortable putting one set of strategies in place. So I think with quantum too, so with both parallel, I think it's an interesting dynamic to continue to learn, but also to test things. And I think to that is, engineering is going to have a very bright future, for decades to come.
You touched on it just a second ago, but model choice is confusing, fantastic, difficult to navigate, a lot of different things. What's ServiceNow's approach to model choice?
So we're agnostic, and similar approach to AI, we're very agnostic in that. And I think that's one of the beauties of how we work together, because quite honestly, so are you. But I think for us is to try to figure out the orchestration that's needed still in being agnostic. But I think that there's, the different models today have also governance issues. Like there's European models that have quite different information as they do here. And if you actually try to solve a problem and you gave the same problem to 5 different models, you would be surprised at what you get back and how different the answers actually are. So don't take what the models give as face value and make a business decision on just what the model inputs. But I think that one of the things that you can do is start benchmarking the success, and also benchmarking who's using what. And I think that's one of the reasons why the AI Control Tower from ServiceNow is very valuable, because it gives that window into who's using the models and what's the benefit of the models. And you could start, so I think parsing the data, and it goes back to understanding the data, but models are super, super interesting. Certain models are good for certain things. And I think that's one of the things the enablement piece has to help people understand. Is that good for you? And it might not be.
Which poses some very interesting questions when you look at an organization and how they're going to start implementing AI and who's in charge of choosing models. I don't know if you have looked into how that governance piece is. It's a slightly different problem.
I don't think that we haven't been told, like, do this, not that. I think there has been a definite gravitation towards trying new things and bringing them forward. And if you have a case for trying something new that we don't have access to, I think it's something that the executive team is very receptive to that. But I think, make a business case for models, I think is very important too. People use models, and to your point earlier, they just assume it's the right model. Now we're talking about how we came together is the enterprise and the cloud. Mm-hmm. Enterprise models, some models are better than others. And some models, you may just get the job done. And I think some of that's trial and error. I mean, I was just saying this because I know one of my developers is in the audience right now. I mean, I use Claude, and I've been using prototyping just as a tool for myself to prove ideas. It's quite valuable. It's kind of interesting to see that. So it's nice that we actually now have Claude inside ServiceNow. So I think sometimes when you make a case for certain models being beneficial, I think you'll have good access to them.
I think one of the things at AWS that we're trying to help guide customers on is how to budget around AI, because it's a new territory. Can you talk a little bit about when you're looking at sort of this overall AI strategy for an organization and looking at the workflows that would require the most attention first? And that's very subjective, obviously. How should organizations look at the right model versus cost versus governance?
Yeah, I mean, well, look, cost is definitely going to be high on the equation. But as I said earlier, certain models are different for the enterprise than they are for normal use. Nevertheless, I think how you're going to do it is tie the models to strategy. And I think that's another thing that's been missing too, is people have been using AI but actually not tying it to corporate strategy. And I think as people start to bring AI and strategy closer together, I think you're going to find results. And it's interesting because at ServiceNow, we have our CFO, the corporate strategy team actually reports to her. So think about this for a second. So spending in AI, financial results, strategic initiatives, they're tied together. And I think you're going to see more of that. And by that, I mean bringing AI closer to strategy, because I think that we need to start proving this, because it shouldn't be a blank check. And I think that's been the approach for the last 2 years, is we had the OpenAI ChatGPT moment, and people just started writing a check just because they wanted AI in their brochure. But nevertheless, I think putting it when we have tangible results that you can actually support, customer validations, like we had DXC up here earlier. I think having customers actually saying that we've tried it and we worked and it worked, you'll get the bigger budget for AI. But I think we need more proof. And I think that's going to take time. But I like the notion of bringing AI and strategy closer together, because ultimately, I think the benefit is super high. And I think that's one of the reasons why strategically we've come together, because we know that there's a bigger story here, but we've aligned strategy with the spending. And I think that's maybe a lesson to think about after this.
Yeah, we've seen a number of organizations report increased cost savings by using AI, even though there is a different spend calculation that goes along with it. And I would say, at AWS, a number of the organizations that we've worked with, first and foremost, sort of early on in all of this, tackled really big use cases early on. And I think we've talked a lot about, don't do that. Start smaller and kind of work your way up. What's your advice for organizations?
I think you've heard me actually say this expression before, but if there's any baseball fans in the audience, if you hit a single every day, you get into the Hall of Fame. You do not need to hit a home run. And I think that's been, a misconception about how to use AI, is you need to show grand results. Hit the base hit, show the results, build upon those results, and I think you'll have a lot more of strategic outcomes that you can be proud of.
In sort of last question for you, what's the downside to all of this? What advice would you give? Like what to watch out for?
I mean, I think I alluded to it earlier, is I think sometimes we use these models and we take them as credible answers, credible advice. And I think that we still need the human in the loop. And I think we need to model future workflows with more human involvement. And I think that that's something that is going to take a lot of rolling up our sleeves to figure out the place, because it's not just how work is done today. And earlier I mentioned like reimagining work, and I think that's something that I would love to think about more. We bring out the best of each other because behind closed doors we're pushing the problem set. And I think that's something that I think people should start to do, is what is the compliance? What's the topic of this panel, governance? Like that's going to be part of like what is going to be pulled through. So, I mean, I think, if you can meet the upcoming regulations, like don't look just past one quarter or second quarter. There's a lot humming. The fact that quantum is part of a conversation with AWS and ServiceNow, you can see that we're taking this super seriously. So I think as you're planning for what comes next, don't forget to where we are, and responsible AI is built on trust. And that's one of the hallmarks of our relationship.
Yeah, and I think getting people used to using it in the first place, right, too?
Trial and error.
Yeah, trial and error. John, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you all for joining us today. Thank you for being at AWS reInvent. Hope you have a wonderful week.